Have you ever found yourself in a conflict and just wondered, is there a better way to do this? A way that actually heals things instead of just making them worse? Well, it turns out there's this ancient blueprint for exactly that, and it's tucked away in Matthew chapter 18. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into verses 15 through 22. It's this incredible passage that gives us a process for reconciliation and then a profound, almost unbelievable challenge to forgive. All right, let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with a super practical step-by-step guide for handling disagreements. That's in verses 15 to 17. Then we'll get into the divine authority that backs all this up, verses 18 to 20. From there, we'll look at Peter's very real, very human question about forgiveness in verse 21. And that, of course, sets up the grand finale, Jesus' radical answer in verse 22.
First up, a process for reconciliation. You know, Jesus is realistic here. He knows that in any community, people are going to step on each other's toes. Offenses are going to happen. So the real question isn't if they'll happen, but how we're going to deal with them. And what he lays out is a surprisingly clear and methodical plan. Okay, it all kicks off right here in verse 15. The first step is so simple and it's totally private. No social media callouts, no gossiping to friends. You go to the person directly, just the two of you. And notice the goal, it's not to win an argument or to shame them. The goal is to gain thy brother. It's all about restoring that relationship. It's a call for discretion and genuine healing right from the very start. So what if that one-on-one doesn't work out? Well, the process escalates, but it does so methodically. Step 2, which we see in verse 16, is to bring 1 or 2 witnesses. Now, this isn't about ganging up on somebody. It's about establishing fairness and accountability, making sure the facts are clear. And if there's still no resolution, verse 17 gives us step 3. You bring the matter to the church, meaning the larger community or its leaders, for a final spiritual resolution. Now, this brings us to one of the most difficult phrases in this whole section, right at the end of verse 17. If someone refuses to listen even to the whole community, Jesus says to treat them as a heathen man and a publican. Whoa, that sounds incredibly harsh, right? But it's not a command to hate or condemn them. It's really a form of disfellowship, a kind of separation from the community. But the ultimate hope is that this separation will lead to some deep reflection, repentance, and hopefully eventual restoration.
But here's the thing. This whole process for reconciliation, it isn't just some good human resources policy. It has this powerful heavenly dimension to it. These next few verses show us the divine authority that's actually behind the community's decisions and the incredible power that we find in unity.
Verse 18 is, well, it's a massive statement. Jesus says that the righteous judgments made by his community on earth are actually recognized and confirmed in heaven. This is huge. It means that when the community is acting in love and truth to solve a conflict, they're not just acting on their own. They're acting with divine approval.
So what do these words bind and loose actually mean? Well, they were pretty common terms that meant forbidding or permitting something. In this context, it basically means that heaven gives its official stamp of approval on the Spirit-led actions of the church, whether that's a tough disciplinary action or a joyful decision of reconciliation. It's a really powerful validation of the community's authority when it's used the right way.
And this power of unity doesn't stop with discipline. Verse 19 takes this principle and applies it to prayer. It says that when just 2 people agree on something here on earth, in line with God's will, their unified faith has the power to move heaven. It just beautifully shows that unity isn't just for keeping order. It's the key to unlocking divine power.
Notice that number that keeps popping up, 2 or 3? First it was for witnesses, and now it's for gathering together. It seems like such a small number, but it holds this immense significance.
And here's why that little number is so important. Verse 20 gives us this incredible promise. Wherever just 2 or 3 people are gathered in his name, Christ himself is right there in the middle of them. I mean, what a profound assurance. It means that in those really difficult moments, when you're trying to work things out or praying together, you are never, ever alone. Divine guidance and presence are guaranteed. Okay, so this entire discussion about process and heavenly authority, it all leads to a very practical, very human question from Peter. You can almost picture him listening to all of this, and his mind is just churning, trying to figure out, what are the actual limits here? How far does this forgiveness thing really go?
So in verse 21, Peter just comes out and asks it, Lord, how many times do I have to forgive my brother when he sins against me? Like up to 7 times? I mean, on the surface, this sounds pretty reasonable, right? He's trying to be generous. He's just looking for a clear rule, a finish line for forgiveness.
To really get why Peter's suggestion was a big deal, you have to understand the context. The common teaching from rabbis at the time was that you should forgive someone up to 3 times. The 4th time, that's when judgment was due. So Peter, by suggesting 7 times, more than doubling the standard, he thinks he's being incredibly magnanimous. He thinks he's setting the bar really, really high.
And we also have to get the symbolism. The number 7 in Jewish culture was a huge deal. It represented completeness, perfection. Think about the 7 days of creation. So Peter wasn't just pulling a number out of thin air. He was proposing what he thought was a perfect, complete, and final standard for forgiveness. He's basically asking, is a complete measure of forgiveness enough, Lord?
And that question, it perfectly sets the stage for the climax of this whole passage, because Jesus' answer doesn't just raise the bar that Peter set, it completely obliterates it and redefines the entire game.
And here it is, verse 22. Jesus says, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Wow, this is easily one of the most famous and, frankly, most challenging statements he ever made. He takes Peter's generous, countable number and just replaces it with something that sounds astronomical.
Now, if you do the quick math, 70 times 7 is 490. But is Jesus actually telling Peter to get out a notepad and start a tally sheet to forgive someone 490 times, and then on the 491st offense say, sorry, you're out?
Yeah, of course not. The number isn't a new, higher limit to keep track of. It's a symbolic way of saying, stop counting altogether. It's the complete removal of all limits. Jesus is teaching that real forgiveness isn't something you count. It's an attitude. It's a way of life that should be as boundless and unending as God's own mercy is to us.
And check this out. This shows just how radical this teaching really is. Way back in the book of Genesis, there's this guy named Lamech, and he boasts about getting multiplied vengeance. He says if his ancestor Cain is avenged 7-fold, he will be avenged 70 and 7-fold. Jesus takes that ancient cry for exponential revenge and completely flips it on its head, turning it into a new law of exponential mercy. He's replacing a culture of endless payback with a kingdom of endless grace.
Which leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. The move from Peter's 7 times to Jesus' 70 times 7, it's a shift from calculation to character. It's not about keeping score anymore. So the real question this passage leaves us with is this: if forgiveness isn't a number we count, but an attitude we're supposed to cultivate, what does it truly mean to live a life without limits on our mercy?